Hello everyone, welcome back to my deck guide series. In these videos, I condense a full detailed deck guide into a 5-minute video chock full of quality info, including card choices, deck strategy, tech options, and the mulligan game plan. Today I'm showing off Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro. This is by far the most popular early set 5 deck, and you can see my preferred list right here. This is an important deck to know how to play with and against, because an ultra fast deck like this sets the benchmark for what slower decks must be able to react to in order to succeed in an aggro defined meta. Just like we've seen in the last few sets, Amber Amethyst once again leads the way for aggro decks, but this time around the deck is better than ever. In fact, it's the fastest, most aggressive deck we've seen in Lorcana, enough to be a top meta contender, especially early on in the format. So let's go ahead and dive into this deck. Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro is a fast aggro deck that aims to overwhelm your opponent early. Consider playing this deck if you like an ultra explosive early game, turn after turn lore pressure, small inkwell requirements, sudden lore gain, and a simple linear game plan. The goal is to quest fast, so early 2 lore characters are the cornerstone of this deck. With the new addition of Daisy Duck, Donald's Date, she joins Lilo and Maleficent to bring the total 1-cost 2 lore characters up to 12. Combine these with Pascal and Chernobog's followers, and 1/3 of the deck is now a 1-cost character. This is an important aspect of the deck, as you'll want to lay down constant pressure with 1 or 2 questing characters played out each turn. Daisy is the shiny new MVP, of course, as her 1/4 stat line makes her incredibly difficult to remove. Without a specific answer from the opponent, expect a turn 1 Daisy to stick around until turn 3, at which point more characters have joined to back her up. Ideally, this means another 2 Daisies on turn 2, but this could be any combination of your 1-cost characters. Now, Daisy Duck does have a drawback. When she quests, your opponent gets to look at the top card of their deck, drawing it into their hand if it's a character, otherwise it gets placed at the bottom of their deck. During all this questing, you'll also aim to weave in your Amethyst Chromacon. For only 2 ink, you'll be able to begin drawing an extra card each turn, and this is really the vital puzzle piece that this deck was missing before. Now you can play out cheap characters turn after turn without fear of running out of steam. Your Chromacon is here to keep you topped off with aggro threats. Now, just like Daisy Duck, this card does benefit your opponent, as they also get to draw a card each time you use your Amethyst Chromacon. There's certainly a risk and reward component here. Your opponent will be drawing a lot of extra cards. However, because of the sheer amount of pressure you have, this deck is built to win extremely fast. Your opponent's card advantage means nothing if you hit 20 lore, and this deck is a lore gaining machine. Piglet is another dangerous early game character that provides even more questing strength, and a couple copies of Mim Snake join as well. They could be used to bounce back and protect your 1-cost characters, but Snake is much better off as a later tool that can bounce Merlin Goats out of play to gain lore and end the game. Instead, your character protection comes from your bodyguards, with Simba, Baloo, and Donald Duck all here to protect your Daisies, Piglets, Lilos, and Maleficents. These bodyguards are a core component of the deck, especially Donald Duck, who gives a character +1 lore when he's questing, and Baloo, who threatens to gain 2 lore himself when he's banished. These sources of uninteractive lore gain from Baloo and Merlin Goat are another theme of this deck that makes it even more dangerous and allows it to have an explosive finish. And that's another reason why racing up to double-digit lore is so important. Once you hit a threshold of 14 or 15 lore, this deck threatens a lethal jump up to 20 quick with Baloo, Merlin Goat, or simply turn after turn pressure with Chromacon finding constant characters to play out. On the defensive side of things, we really just want to go fast and ignore the opponent a lot of the time, but Befuddle and Mim Fox can be used reactively, especially if you find yourself against an opposing aggro deck and you need to swing the tempo back in your favor. Finally, this deck is capped off at the 4-cost slot, with Sven, Reindeer Steed, and Dolores Easy Listener joining Merlin Goat as your top end. These are perhaps the most different choices compared to other lists I've seen, but I really like what each of these cards brings to the deck. These characters are both 4-cost 3/3s that quest for 2 lore. Dolores is here as additional card draw, replacing the typical Merlin Rabbit. She draws less, but quests for more and is inkable. Sven also joins the party. He's here to protect your questing characters, readying them to safety starting on turn 4. He's a fantastic follow-up to our turn 3 bodyguards, and I've had Daisy Duck survive until turn 5 thanks to the squad of bodyguards plus Sven. The ideal gameplay line early on is a turn 1 2-lore quester, ideally Daisy Duck, and a 2 more 1-drops on turn 2. Follow that up with Donald Duck or Baloo, or even an early Chromacon plus additional 1-drop to really lay down the heat. Alternatively, Piglet on 2 works great as well, especially if you can curve into Sven. But there are really so many different options available. Your mulligan plan is going to reflect these sequences as you want to aim to curve out nicely. I recommend throwing back your Merlin Goat and Mem Bounce characters unless you know you'll need Fox in a particular matchup. Keep in mind you'll almost always be inking your 3 and 4 cost characters on the first few turns, and you can often keep your inkwell at 3 or 4 ink, longer than you'd expect with this deck. The idea is constant pressure on each turn. Challenge yourself to stretch your turn horizon, thinking about what your plan is a few turns out. This will help your early mulligan, hand management, and inking decisions, and this type of deck is a good one to practice this skill with, as it's generally linear, but certainly still has ample opportunity for creative sequencing because of how your cards interact with each other. For additional considerations and tech options, there are several great choices for this deck. Pinocchio or Wendy can add more lore threats early on. Arthur and Mem Elephant can bring more combo potential to the deck and unlock more lore-focused bounce shenanigans. Maleficent, Rabbit, Friends, and even Rapunzel can help with card draw if that's lacking. And finally, the library, Queen's Castle, Spellbook, and Gathering should all be mentioned as ways to diversify your lore threats in this deck. Overall, this is the most dangerous aggro deck ever seen in Lorcana, and it's extremely fun to play. Thanks everyone for tuning in and watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and until next time, peace.